first year of the 12-team playoff, we already see the impacts of it. Ohio State with their 2 losses to Michigan and Oregon, there's not a single chance that they're in the playoffs. Notre Dame, they still could be in as the 4th seed, in contention with probably Texas and Penn State for that. And just again, it's a transformational year in college football on so many levels. You have an even larger emphasis of NIL in the transfer portal, pay for playing away, and obviously the conference realignment with the death of the Pac-12 and the new teams in the Big Ten and Big 12. And yeah, I think it is only fitting that you have, again, 2 teams that otherwise would not be in this opportunity. Otherwise, I mean, we might be seeing Ohio State and Notre Dame play again in the Fiesta Bowl, for example, like they did in, I want to say 2015. But yeah, looking at these teams' rosters, there's similar stories in a way, just based on they added a good bit from the transfer portal. Obviously, Notre Dame, it's Riley Leonard as the biggest catalyst. You got some other players like Bo Collins, who's made a pretty good impact. And for Ohio State, they've had more of an impact. I'd say Will Howard is obviously the main man for the Buckeyes. They got Quinshon Judkins as well. Caleb Downs, one of the best players in the country. But again, there's a lot of players that they wanted to come back for another year. Jack Kaiser, the Notre Dame linebacker, he's a guy, he said, I think this team could win a national championship. I'm going to come back. I want to win a national championship. You have guys like, oh my God, Jack Soy, I don't know how I was blanking on that name. He's a guy from the Ohio State or the Columbus area, been a Buckeye guy his whole life. It meant a lot for him to have this chance. One, he really wanted to beat Michigan, which that didn't happen, but a goal that arguably just as important, more important to some, winning the national championship. He's got his team right in position to do that. So there's just a lot going on with these 2 teams. You got the adversity, overcoming the embarrassing losses to Michigan and NIU, and now you're right here. You're on the doorstep. You are 60 minutes away from something historic. It's already been a very memorable year for both programs, but it would end a lot better with a fancy ring and a new trophy to bring back to South Bend or Columbus.
Yeah, and so let's dive in more on that. So, as you see with our little fancy graphics that we have up here, so we do have Notre Dame and Ohio State. Did want to touch base because we did not talk about this previously. So Notre Dame, they did end up beating Penn State by last second field goal by Mr. Jeter. And it was a pretty good game. The Orange Bowl, honestly, a very, very nice game. Penn State kind of started hot. They ended up leading at halftime 10-3, but then overall a 27-21 victory by the Fighting Irish. Your standout players, obviously, Riley Leonard he went 15 for 23, 223 yards, and a touchdown, but he did have those 2 interceptions, one being quite early. Drew Allar on the other side of that, he had 1 interception that came at probably the worst moment, set up right for that game-winning field goal. And I will say, Steve Angeli, shout out him, while Riley Leonard went down, he went 6 for 7 for 44 yards. Past that, there was a few, rushing on the Notre Dame side. They had a few rushing touchdowns from Love and Leonard as well. But Nick Singleton, probably the best rusher in the game, he had 15 carries for 84 yards and 3 touchdowns. Probably, if Penn State were to have won this, Nick Singleton would have won MVP. On the other side, or on the receiving side of things, 2 players really showed out for both teams. Jaden Greathouse had 7 receptions for 105 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Warren had 6 receptions for 75 yards and not a touchdown, but a huge effect on the game. But yeah, Alec, what were your thoughts on the Orange Bowl and how it played out?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Penn State, if you just look at the box score and you look at who caught a pass for them, you see a lot of tight ends, you see a couple of running backs. You do not have a single receiver that recorded a catch. All year, the biggest problem with this Penn State team has been the receiving game. They've been very inconsistent, and also their top receivers as well they've entered the portal, so that's something to look out for Penn State next year. Omari Evans and Trey Wallace, they are both portaling. They just did not have the production from their wide receiver room that they needed. Plain and simple. Julian Fleming, he was the transfer from Ohio State. He was thought to have a fantastic year and finally break out when he's not surrounded by the fantastic receivers like Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka and Carnell Tate. More on them later. but that just never happened. And you could see how badly Penn State needed one of those players to step up and make a play. And Aller suffered a lot from that as well. He definitely did not play his best game, but when you're throwing to receivers that can't get open, you gotta be better. And yeah, Drew Aller definitely missed some throws, but his job could have definitely been made a lot easier. And if that interception at the end of the game, he absolutely should not have thrown it. No, I'm not arguing that, but if he went down to his third target, Amari Evans, and nobody was open. If somebody got open earlier, they had better receivers. Something different might have happened in that game. Maybe I'm not even saying Penn State wins it in regulation, but Aller gets a completion, throws it to they go to overtime. Who knows what happens from there? It's just you can't. That's really what lost the game. The Notre Dame defensive backfield, which again is fantastic, just completely took away the Penn State wide receivers, and Penn State just couldn't do enough with their running backs and tight ends to get it done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think along with that, the fact Penn State had a tight end or a fullback, depending on how you really want to notate them, as their leading receiver, that said a lot, right? Like Nick
Yeah,
Singleton also had 2 receptions, which if Tyler Warren didn't exist, would have been the second most or tied for the first most in the team. So. But yeah, but that's all on the Notre Dame game going into this. Basically, a really good showing on offense and defense. They held down a Penn State team who, both these teams really coming into this, had been dominant in several of their performances. I know obviously Penn State, they had that bad loss to Ohio State, or not necessarily a bad loss, but just a blemish on the record, right? But moving on to, hold on, I gotta get the point. That side of the graphic, we have the Ohio State versus Texas. Now, this game, look, it's a 14-point victory. All credit to them. It was not a 14-point game, right? It was not one of these that it was over, with like plenty of time to go. No. So if we wanna, go a breakdown, if we're looking at the scoring summary, so it took until 7 minutes into the fourth quarter for Ohio State to pull away with a late lead. And then with 2 minutes and 13 seconds, Jack Sawyer had an 83-yard fumble return to seal the deal. And once again, Steve Sarkisian goes down on a and goal situation. He just can't seem to know what to do. At some point, they had this problem against Oklahoma, I believe, either just last year or this year and last year. I don't remember off the top of my head. But it's just one of those things, right? Quinn Ewers had a solid game and losing, had 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Will Howard, he did his job, honestly, right? 289 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. So to my take on this is that I think the biggest padlock stat is that when Travion Wisener had 17 carries for 46 yards, a 2.7 yard average for Texas. The fact that Ohio State could just bottleneck the Texas run game that had been quite effective in other times. That was beautiful for them, right? Like that was the perfect thing. Obviously, Quinn Ewers had 2 fumbles, Arch Manning had a fumble, but even on their side, Will Howard had a fumble for Ohio State. So I think that was the biggest thing, and also Carnell Tate having 87 yards receiving, Travion Henderson having that long 75-yard reception touchdown. It was a long day in the office for Texas, right? And then graphic person that's currently on the graphic, Quinshaw Junkins had 2 touchdowns of his own. So this was one of those games that Ohio State. I don't think anyone outside of Texas and Ohio State was actively rooting for either team to win, rather than I think everyone was rooting for both teams to lose. But Ohio State comes out on top, right? A very simple, like, there's no real thing that Texas could have done for this to be any different other than, converting that end goal situation. But yeah, but Alec, what are your thoughts on this game? And then I will start talking about the national championship as a whole.
Yeah, these two teams, I know it was a 14-point margin of victory, but these two teams were very even for the most part. The difference was just two big plays, and at the end of the day, 1-2 plays is what decides the game, and that's what happened. At the end of the first half, Will Howard hit Travion Henderson on a long screen pass, took about 70, 80 yards to the end zone. It's a spot where it kind of looked like Ohio State think there's about 40 seconds left in the half. They weren't really trying to, you know, go all out, run a 2-minute drill, trying to get in the end zone, but they called the right play at the right time. And when you got a special player like Travion Henderson, he can get in the end zone on a moment's notice. And then you talked about it with the goal line stand. Yes, Texas was at the 1 yard line. There's actually two plays that are involved with this, I'll say. There's the second and goal play, which again, it's at the 1 or 2 yard line. They run the toss to Wisner. He loses 7 or 8 yards. And that's just, you go from right there to having to get 9 yards in 2 plays, makes everything a lot more difficult. And on the fourth down play, as we all know what happened, Jack Sawyer with that incredible strip sack of Quinn Ewers takes it back, and it really was a nail in the Texas coffin. But if you take away those 2 plays, I know I hate doing that. Oh, if you take away those 2 plays, the whole outcome would have changed. But yeah, that's really how it was. These two teams, they were even, and Ohio State, they made the plays when it mattered most. Something that Notre Dame has also done as well. They both made timely plays to get to this spot. So excited to see how that will all fare out on Monday.
Yeah, and I'll say just one closing thought before we kind of, how these teams line up, how these teams match up, that kind of thing, is that Texas, you're still there, right? I know that people are going to be like, well, Quinn Ewers, and okay, here's my least favorite, a college football ick, because at some point I'm gonna put out an ick list, right? Um, we're all aware what that term means, but it's like college football ick for me are these. I don't want to call it franchises because I've been so used to pro terms. These programs who their fans, support the players. The final game, the buzzer sounds, and then all of a sudden we hate our starting quarterback, right? Or we hate this other guy. He graduated, he transferred, whatever. He put his heart and soul for however much time it was into your football program. Do not, and the reason I say this is because Quinn Ewers left and was like, oh, it's going to be so perfect after this. Ask how many of these playoff teams of the past lost a quarterback and came back. Especially, okay, lost a quarterback and came back, and they're not named Alabama because probably Alabama's had a few. But Clemson, because I don't think anybody hated on Trevor Lawrence. I almost said Trevor Manning. Trevor Lawrence leaving. But when was the last time Clemson has made the playoffs since Trevor Lawrence? Or I mean, at least a
They made
national
it
championship.
this. They made the playoffs this year for the first time since the post Trevor Lawrence era, and they lost in the first round to Texas.
Yes, and they lost by 40, and they barely made it. So it's like, ugh. And there's another one, and the reason I was bringing up Clemson in the most part is that Cade, if Cade were to have left this year, everybody would be like, oh, good riddance on Cade, but because, anyways, I'm tirading away from our point here.
Yeah,
Um, sorry,
it's
but
like a similar thing with this. I'm gonna just carry on with this scout. It's
yeah,
like when players like I'm gonna use Jalen Hurts as an example of this. Jalen Hurts plays for Alabama. He starts for Alabama. He
yeah,
it was is a successful quarterback with Alabama, but he gets benched. He loses his job, and he ends up at Oklahoma. Has another very good season there. Gets drafted, and when Roger Goodell read or whoever announced the pick read the Philadelphia Eagles select Jalen Hurts, they didn't say Alabama. They said Oklahoma.
yeah,
This is a guy that Alabama. He kind of got pushed aside for Tua, and it was what it was best for Alabama. It is what it is. But
yeah,
now Alabama they claim Jalen Hurts, and to my knowledge, Jalen Hurts hasn't said anything about it. He doesn't say, "Oh, I'm a Alabama and Oklahoma guy," like what Joe Burrow does. Joe Burrow he credits a lot of his development to Ohio State, and when he was a backup, whatever. I don't see a problem with that, but you can't just use these players as whatever to make you look better, make your
yeah,
program look better, and you can say you want to get rid of a guy, and a Kyle McCord with Syracuse and Ohio State might be a future example of this, depending on what happens to him in the NFL. You can't say, oh, he's a Honda, I want to get rid of him, but he does something good in another spot and say, oh yeah, we developed him, we did that.
yeah,
You can't have your you can't bake your cake and eat it too, whatever the quote is. So
yeah, yeah. You can't
that's
have your
another
cake and eat
point
it
off of
too.
that. Have your cake and
Yeah.
I got it.
Um. Yeah, I think that's it. But But yeah, but and I will say Jalen Hurts does claim both, but I think it's all because of Saban. It's the same thing with Milroe. Dude, if any of these Alabama fans, and I know we're so off, we will be back in a minute, trust me. But if any of these Alabama fans, if Nick Saban was in the room and they were like, "Oh, I hate Milroe," Nick Saban would like get red in the face probably. And that man's he's real calm. He's real calm if you ever had a chance to talk to him. But yeah. Uh, anyways, but we will continue forth. But yeah, but as a matchup wise between these two teams, it's kind of difficult. Kind of difficult. So they did play last year. Ohio State did win last year on that last second. The all the beef now between Lou Holtz and Ryan Day. I love that. We'll talk about that more, especially after this game happens. Um, but essentially, I'm sorry, I have like three burps in a row. Uh, this is a different matchup. Notre Dame has a new quarterback. Riley Leonard adds a whole new brand to this offense, practically. He's led them here. He's led them to three straight victories to this point, and they've been a not necessarily dominant performance, but they've been a dominant team like through it all. The Notre Dame offensive line, if you told me that their strength would be their offensive line and their run game going into this, I'd be like, yeah, sure, but it's like they didn't win more than one game, right? No, their offensive line has been better, and they've been winning the trench warfare better in every single game. I think Mitchell Evans, the fact that he's like a dual threat of a possession guy and a blocking guy, that's a huge benefit to them, right? And that could be a huge thing in this game where you have a guy like Jack Sawyer off the edge or off linebacker, where it's like he's going to be an X factor if you can't get rid of him. Anyways, with all that, my take, and I think we'll just jump straight into predictions because I don't know enough football to really dive into the like the ins and outs of like, oh, like they're gonna dominate the A gap and stuff like that. But anyway, so my straight prediction for this would, I think that Notre Dame's offense is gonna make it to where they don't lose as bad. I'll still take Ohio State, but I'll take like if you give me Notre Dame plus 6.5, and I'll look up the line right now. But if you give me
I think
like,
it's 8.5 right now for
yeah,
Ohio State.
if you give me 8.5, I'm gladly taking the 8.5, right? I'm gladly taking the Notre Dame plus 8.5. Over under, I have no idea. I think this game could be crazy. When it comes to over under, I think this game could go from like, like a 30, like this game could easily be like 35 to 30, but also just as easy to be like a 10 to 12 game. But yeah, so my prediction on it was gonna be Notre Dame plus 8.5. I'll play the spread. I know some people are like, oh, don't play the spread. That's dumb. But then the same people that say that are the ones that pick like 9 of the 10 favorites, and they're like, I'm a genius. Anyways, Alec, what are your picks?
Yeah, I'll save who I'm gonna pick at the end, but I think this is a game that these two teams have two different ways of how they want to play it. Notre Dame, they want to rely on their defense, which has been so good for them all season. I believe they've only allowed over 20 points, I think twice on the season now, and one of them was against Penn State or over 30 points, something along those two lines.
Hmm.
They want to rely on their defense, which they've been a little bit less banged up on. Still a very banged up team all around, and they've been so good there. And
Yeah.
limit how much their offense has to do when the offense is on the field. I think that Notre Dame's going to try and take it slow, try and sustain drives, chew up some clock, just again play into their strengths. Ohio State's strengths, meanwhile, is just their incredibly explosive offense, and I think Ohio State, they are the more talented team. Ohio State, in theory, should win this game just based on their roster. But if Notre Dame can limit possessions, they can force some turnovers, which they've been so good at doing all year. They have a very good chance. And to stop the Ohio State offense, Texas did a pretty good job modeling this. You got to stop Jeremiah Smith. What Texas did, they gave a lot of help on Smith, who again is a true freshman. When Texas has one of the best cornerbacks in the country with Jade Barron, they got Andrew Makuba, a guy that I'm very high on. I talked about that on one of the previous episodes. Michael Taff is their other safety, just a fantastic defensive back unit. Was entirely focused on stopping Jeremiah Smith. And yeah, with that, a couple other guys ate. Carnell Tate had a good game. Travion Henderson obviously had a good game, and there is a balance you need, but if you can stop Jeremiah Smith, you're going to have a pretty good chance at winning this game. With that being said, it doesn't sound like Notre Dame's going to do a ton of, doubling up Jeremiah Smith. It's from what I've heard. Notre Dame is a very man-heavy team. They will continue to be a very man-heavy team. We'll see what happens though in the game, but that is an advantage that plays into Ohio State's favor. I think Ohio State's receivers, their receiver room is the best in the country. Their receivers are better than Notre Dame's defensive backs, which when healthy, that does assume Benjamin Morrison's playing. He is not. Is probably the best in the country, and even without Morrison, they are still very good and certainly in that top five. Yeah. With all that being said, I don't think that Notre Dame's offense is going to be able to do enough. Their offensive line, they've been very good, I think, but they've been a little bit limited in pass protection. Again, just with all those injuries, and I think Notre Dame or Ohio State, the way Jack Sawyer's been playing, he has 9 sacks on the season. 4.5 of those are in the playoffs. He has 7 pass breakups on the season. All 7 of those are in the playoffs, which is an absolutely insane number. He's been playing so well. I think he's going to continue his great performance. JT Tumaloa, he always steps up in big games, and as the game goes on, I think Ohio State is going to be the team that they make more big plays when it matters. I think they're going to end up coming away with a win by. I think they'll cover as well. I think it'll end up being by about 14 points, similar score to the Ohio State Texas game, something like 13-27 maybe.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Um, yeah, and I think we'll definitely have a big, obviously this is a two-man show. Oh wait, two-man show today. But whenever we get either Joe or Lucas on or whoever, we'll probably have a real big breakdown of the national championship, either Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. But yeah, but I think this will be a really good national championship. Obviously, I'll be, I'll probably go viral 2 or 3 times during this game of just complaining that there's no Southern team and complaining that, yada, yada, yada. But,
It's the Southern charm of the national championship. Come on.
okay, if I was off, like if my work was off Monday, I'm gonna dox myself if I don't work for a federal, we don't have MLK Day off anyways. But if I could, because like I know that I have Tuesday off, like I would go, like just to experience it, right? Just to like hang out with some of the guys I know that are at like the media day or whatever. And but it's not. So, maybe next year. But yeah, but overall I think it'll be fun. And I will say, where I find solace is that one player from both teams is from Alabama. There's more than one player from both teams from Alabama, but two notable players, I should say. So both on this graphic, intentional, by the way. But Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard is from Fairhope. I think I've mentioned that the past 5 episodes that Alec has been on. And he played at Duke, and now he's at Notre Dame, and he's headed to the Senior Bowl. Quidshawn Junkins is from Pike Road, formerly of Ole Miss. Now he plays at Ohio State. Unsure if he's going to any bowls. I don't even know if he's decided on the pros yet, but we'll probably figure more out in the week. But hey, Pike Road's not too far from me. Most of y'all know that I'm from near Montgomery. So I never got to see him play in high school because I kind of started this account a little late. But everything I've heard from him is great player and all that. And then Riley Leonard, Fairhope, I have plenty of, shout out WNSP, shout out Jarrett Bates, all them down there. They love that man. They also love Ryan Williams, another Mobile guy that's playing in college right now. Anyways, but yeah. So speaking of Mobile, Riley Leonard, WNSP, don't we have something else? So we have even more Senior Bowl talk. So we have Seth Hennigan, we have LaQuint Allen Jr., I believe, Clay
Yes, sir.
Webb, Dan the Man Jackson, and then we have friend of the show Jeremiah Pritchett, Trevor Etienne, and Jameer DK from Florida. Probably shouldn't have put the Florida and Georgia guy right next to each other, but hey, someone's going to figure it out. I'll say, I'll pick out a few of my favorites right here. I'll leave LeQuint to the Syracuse man himself.
Thank you.
But I would say if I had to choose, like really all of them are my favorites. So I'll just like do a little quick gloss over. Seth Hennigan, we finally have We have another year where we have a group of five quarterback in. I had Seth in again on my little chart where I had like a chart of like G5 quarterbacks and their stats. There's a few others. I think Gio Lopez, if he did declare, could have also been in because like Gio Lopez's stats were crazy, but like obviously like let the man go back to college. He's gonna be fine. Clay Webb, actually one of the best offensive linemen in the nation that just happened to reside in Jacksonville, Alabama this year. One of the best when you looked at PFF, one of the best that when you looked at even College Football 25, had him as like a 94 overall by the end of the year.
Yeah, I
Um,
saw that.
yeah, Dan Jackson, he's also a huge guy. Um, one of my favorite Georgia Bulldogs of this year. Jeremiah Pritchett, friend of the show, literally have a picture with that man. Should have been able to just pop it up there. We'll get that figured out. Don't worry. And then Trevor Etienne, Georgia guy, brother of Travis Etienne, Jaguars legend, Clemson legend, and Chimere DK. I actually made a pretty big post about Chimere when he originally got announced because in like this is almost order of oldest to newest, where like this or sorry, this is the oldest and this is the newest. So like I made a post about DK really early on. But yeah, but Mr. Alec, what are your thoughts on these editions? And then we'll just like talk about we'll just wrap it up from there.
Yeah, look, the Senior Bowl just they have accumulated a lot of talent, and I like a lot of these guys. These I think that yeah, all seven of these are very obvious draft players, and I think we're gonna get a couple risers from this group. I think Seth Heniken, just seeing what he did, he was so productive at Memphis for 4 years. He's got more experience than just about anybody at the Senior Bowl, other than probably Dylan Gabriel, because Dylan Gabriel's just a different type of experience. I think he throws a very good football. He's a football guy through and through. He knows his stuff. I think he's going to be a pretty good riser. Um, the Jacksonville State Clay Webb. He's again another. He's a fantastic player. Former Georgia Bulldog, right?
Clay Webb.
Yeah.
I believe so. Hold on. I know he's a transfer. Let me remind myself real quick. Yes, formerly of Georgia. Also, he's an Oxford guy. Big O, shout out Big O. That's Oxford's literally 20 minutes down the road from Jacksonville. Yeah, but he was of Georgia. I believe he didn't play in any. Hold on, he did play in. Yeah, he did not play in any of the games there, but he's still, he was still a letter winner, still a college football national champion in 2021. But yeah, but shout out Clay Webb and continue your point.
Yeah, that's a what if. Just Georgia to have some struggles on the offensive line this year. Clay Webb definitely could have contributed to it. Besides the point, though, I think Trevor Etienne declaring for the draft. I think he'd needed another year in college, but he's a very high upside guy. He puts a good week together in Mobile. A couple more people are gonna keep his eyes on him, keep their eyes on him. I can't talk today, Jesus. LaQuinn Allen, again, I am very biased here. I will be the first to admit it. I think he's a guy that is going to be a riser. This is a guy that
Yeah.
he was an all ACC honorable mention. So the sports writers that picked this didn't think he was a top 6 running back in the ACC, which I think is pretty crazy. This season he became one of 4 college running backs to have 1,000 rushing yards, 500 receiving yards. I think it was 60 receptions and 20 touchdowns total. So he's a weapon as a dual threat guy. He can run out of the backfield. He can run out of the slot. He's kind of built as a receiver almost. I think he's about 6'1", 195 pounds or so, maybe a little heavier than that. He's got the thing that impresses me the most with him. He feels like he's built as a wide receiver in a running back's body. He has, I want to say, 11-inch hands. Like I remember one of the broadcasts brought that up. They need custom gloves for him because just regular XL gloves don't fit his hands or whatever. You can see some of the catches he made as well. And again, even with that size, he's a tough runner. He's a high effort guy. He's probably Fran Brown, the Syracuse head coach, had glowing praise for him and his work ethic. I think he's a guy that you're going to hear a lot more about him now. He projects as a very good third down running back in the NFL with potential to have an even bigger role. So watch out for him.
Yeah, for sure. And I think several of these guys have that kind of ability. I know Clay Webb. I've had Clay Webb even last year because I believe he's a redshirt senior, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
redshirt senior. I had him in even some of my drafts last year. I know Zion Washington from Miami a couple of years back was kind of like that, where he was just the old guy for so long. But if you need like an interior guy, I believe they're gonna play him at center in the bowl. I think TDN had talked about that a few different times. But yeah, but overall, very good additions. Like this, like okay, we've been I don't want to call it joking, but like we've been mentioning like, oh, this is the best roster that the Senior Bowl has put together. Dude, I don't think that there's a roster that can come up like anywhere near the current talent that's out there. Like I think we're gonna have a ton of different, how would I say it? Like a ton of different top 100 picks, a ton of different top 40 picks. Like these might not be,
Yeah.
we might not fill out the top 20. I don't think that's possible even with the junior guys. Like I don't think certain players are gonna want to play or gonna want to like, like the top five guys, they might just sit out or something like that.
Yeah.
But
They have nothing to prove, really.
exactly. But these guys that are more than that, like they're working on, top 100 or not top 100, like top 100, top 200, top 300. Like yeah, like Chimere DK. Chimere DK had a top 800 draft grade. And I think this was like August or July. But then over the season, he had a 400. And then like since the week of him like being like announced at the Senior Bowl, he's risen all the way up to like 218, I think is his projected spot, right? And like if that's how do I word this properly? If that's like where it is, like okay, that's cool and all, but it's just like the how the draft works that sometimes it's just crazy. Because like I love DK. Like DK has been one of my favorite Florida Gators to watch the whole time. And it's like how it works sometimes, it just makes no sense to me. Like the difference between 200 and 800 is a smaller difference between like 199 and 1. You know what I'm saying? And it's it's insane to me. But yeah. And then so we talked about Clay, Dan, Shamir, even Trevor and LeQuint, and Hennigan. Okay, so Jamal Pritchett. Shout out Jamal. So Jamal Pritchett, what a very unknown story to the national audience, I would assume. He played at Jackson High School. Go or shout out the Aggies. And at Jackson, he had his whole football life, right? And then he goes to South, which is also in Mobile, right? So the whole time, his final collegiate game will probably be his final game in Mobile, as long as there's no pro team that happens to go to Mobile, right? And the fact that if you can dedicate 16 or 17 years of your football life to this sport, and it all be in one area code, that's crazy to me. And like it's such a great story. I hope people catch on to it more. I know like several of these stories have been brought to the forefront. But that Jamal Pritchett story is like it's not one of those that's like crazy or anything, but it's such like a feel good story. And I know like Riley Leonard's also having a homecoming, so like that would be great. And I don't know how they're divvying up the teams this year, but like you could even get a Riley Leonard to Jamal Pritchett connection. Who knows? Look, I'm not the script writer. I just read the script. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. But Mr. Alec, that's all for me. So do you have any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up the show?
Yeah, I'll touch a little bit on Dan Jackson. I don't think we talked about him very much, and his story is incredible. What Georgia's done, just producing walk-ons and unheralded talent into future stars, is incredible. They got Dan Jackson's really the next guy up. Yeah, he had such a big role as the safety for the Georgia defense, and
Yeah.
he's going to do some great things in the NFL. I think he's going to put together a very good week. He is incredible at with Georgia, and he's going to get another chance to show that off. But yeah, just looking big picture here, this is a very talented roster that the Senior Bowl has put together. Once again, maybe the best roster ever, to be honest. Like we've talked about that a little bit, and there's just so much talent. I wish I could make it out to Mobile with my personal schedule. I can't make that happen, but one of these years I will. And the way the trajectory is looking, it looks like there's probably going to be an even better class next year, and even better by whenever I can finally make it down there.
Yeah, and I will say that I'll definitely enjoy this. It was one of my favorite things that we did last year, even though, and I will say last year it was so rushed. I'm gonna try to make it down there at least a day or two early, so we can at least have, a little bit of extra time to, have all that, like interact with everybody. I know Joe talked about being able to talk to, NFL coaches and all other players, like aside from that, like the social events and stuff like that. But yeah, but with anything else, let me put on the little little intro thing. Yeah.
the
So
intro graphic.
anyway, so that was everything that we talked about the national championship. That was everything that we talked about the Senior Bowl. And yeah, we condensed it a little bit since it was just a 2-man, but we do want to get closer to 30-minute episodes. I don't think anybody's really, watching the full 75-minute show that we put out. But yeah, but if you have any questions for us, feel free to drop them below. Either I or Alec will be able to answer them for you. And hey, feel free to subscribe. I know we've literally had more views than subscribers like the last 3 or 4 episodes. So hey, give us a little shout out, give us a little like, follow, subscribe, and all that. And with all that being said,